She saved a mermaid's baby. 3 days later, this happened. The mermaid panicked. "My baby! I can't escape! They're going to kill me! Save my child!" 2 greedy fishermen pulled a pregnant mermaid from the river. They thought they had found easy money, but the baby she gave birth to ended up in the hands of a young girl who should never have been near that river. What happened next became the greatest secret the girl had ever kept. The sun hung heavy and golden over the village of Umu Adwa. It was the forbidden day, a time when the river was said to belong only to the spirits. Usually, the village was silent, with doors bolted and windows shuttered. But today, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of respect, it was the silence of a held breath. At the edge of the sacred river, the water began to churn. It wasn't the gentle ripple of a tilapia or the splash of a crocodile. The center of the river bubbled like a boiling pot, and suddenly, 4 figures broke the surface. Leading them was a young girl, no more than 13 years old. Her skin was a vibrant electric blue that shimmered even in the shadows. Her eyes were wide, glowing like sapphires, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. This was the child Toma had saved 13 years ago, the mermaid baby, now a teenager returning to the world of dry dust. Behind them rose 3 formidable figures. One was a woman with scales of fiery ruby red, her hair flowing like blood-red coral. Beside her was a woman whose skin was as bright as the midday sun, a golden yellow so intense it made the air around her glow. Standing as a wall of protection behind them was a massive man. His skin was the color of obsidian black, deep and impenetrable, with muscles that looked like carved basalt. They reached the muddy bank. Then, the sounds of the forbidden day was shattered by a terrifying noise, the sounds of scales cracking like breaking glass. In a swirl of mist and magical light, their powerful tails shuddered and split. Fins lengthened into bone and muscle. The blue, red, yellow, and black scales retracted, revealing smooth, shimmering skin. For the first time, their feet touched the hot, red earth of the village. The transformation was imperfect. As they began to move, they didn't walk like humans. Their knees lifted too high, their bodies swayed awkwardly from side to side, and their arms flailed as they tried to catch the invisible currents of the air. They looked like beautiful, colorful puppets being pulled by clumsy strings. They entered the village heart. The rhythmic click-clack of their necklaces, made of pearl and whalebone, echoed against the mud walls. "It is here," the little blue girl whispered. Her voice sounded like the song of a distant whale, echoing in the chests of the hidden villagers. "I smell the scent of the one who hid me. I feel the echo of the heart that beat for mine when the world was cold." The black warrior, his obsidian skin reflecting the sunlight like a dark mirror, stayed alert. His hand rested on a dagger carved from a megalodon tooth. The red and yellow mermaids scanned the huts, their unblinking eyes searching for their lost sister, the mother of the blue girl, stolen by greed so many years ago. The villagers watched through the cracks in their doors, paralyzed. They had never seen colors like these. The visitors looked like jewels dropped into a bowl of dust. The blue girl stopped abruptly in front of a house that looked more decayed than the others. The atmosphere there was heavy with old bitterness. It was the home of Inkiru, the cruel stepmother. "Here," the blue girl said, pointing a slender blue finger. "Cruelty lives here, but it is also where my savior once wept." Without a word, the black warrior stepped forward. With one hand, he shattered the wooden door as if it were made of dried twigs. A piercing scream tore through the air. Inkira was dragged out into the sunlight by her arm. She shrieked, her face contorted in a mask of pure terror as she looked up at the obsidian giant. She tried to curse, she tried to fight, but when she looked into the glowing white eyes of the black warrior, her voice died in her throat. The red dust of the village square swirled in small cyclones beneath the unsteady feet of the four visitors. At the center of the square, where the elders usually gathered to settle disputes, the scene was surreal. The black warrior, whose massive frame seemed carved from obsidian, held the stepmother Inkiru by the arm. The woman who had once been so quick to strike Toma was now nothing more than a trembling shadow. Her eyes, usually sharp with malice, were wide with a primal terror. She tried to speak, but only a strangled rattle escaped her throat. The entire village was there, frozen in place. Mothers clutched their children, and men held their machetes without daring to lift them. No one had ever seen such beings. Their colors, the electric blue, the ruby red, the sun yellow, and the abyssal black, seemed to insult the dull gray of daily life. The mermaid with the ruby red scales stepped forward. Her gait was jerky, each step seeming to cost her an immense effort, as if the earth's gravity were trying to crush her. She opened her mouth, and when she spoke, it was not a human voice. It was a polyphonic sound, a mixture of dolphin whistles and the distant rumble of an underwater thunderstorm. The villagers covered their ears. Some fell to their knees. "Dwellers of the dust," she cried out, her words vibrating in the chests of everyone present. "You have broken the pact. The forbidden day is no longer sacred to you. Your nets have torn the womb of our family. You stole a mother. You chained a queen." She pointed a pearly nailed finger at Inkiru. "This woman represents your cruelty. She mistreated the one who had mercy on us. She shall be our voice among you until justice is done. We hold her hostage, for blood calls for blood." The black warrior tightened his grip on Inkiru's arm, and she let out a whimper of pain. The little blue mermaid, the 13-year-old girl, stared at the crowd with infinite sadness. She was searching for a face, a scent, but the village offered her nothing but fear. "Listen well," the yellow mermaid interjected, her skin shimmering with a golden glow that was almost blinding. "As long as your men cast their nets on the forbidden day, your river will give you nothing but bitterness. Your wells will turn to salt. Your crops will wither on the vine. The curse of the depths is already crawling toward your homes." A murmur of panic rippled through the crowd. Famine? Thirst? This was the end of the village. One of the elders, the oldest of the council, stepped forward trembling, his hands raised in peace. "O powerful spirits of the water, what do you want from us? We are simple men. We know nothing of this capture." The red mermaid pointed toward the forest. "We seek the thieves. We seek the two predators who tore our sister from her element. Their names burn in the river's current, Chuka and Obina." At the mention of those names, a deathly silence fell. Everyone knew. Everyone had heard the rumors of the sudden wealth the two fishermen hoped to gain. "Deliver them to us!" the black warrior roared, his voice shaking the mud walls of the huts. "Deliver them, or this woman will return with us to the abyss, and your village will never taste a drop of fresh water again. We want our sister. Where is she?" The villagers looked at one another. The fear of the curse was stronger than any loyalty to the fishermen. A cry arose from the back of the crowd. "They are over there, hiding behind the fish drying racks. Catch them!" In minutes, the angry crowd turned on Chupa and Obina. The two men who thought they would become rich were dragged unceremoniously before the mermaids. They were pale, their clothes torn by the furious hands of their own neighbors. The village square had become an open-air courtroom. Chuka and Obina, the two fishermen whose greed had ignited this storm, lay in the dust, their hands bound, trembling like leaves before the four water creatures. The black warrior loomed over them, his mere presence stifling their cries of protest. The yellow mermaid, whose skin radiated a golden light, stepped forward. Her gait was jerky, each step seeming to cost her an immense effort, as if the earth's gravity were trying to crush her. She opened her mouth, and when she spoke, it was not a human voice. It was a polyphonic sound, a mixture of dolphin whistles and the distant rumble of an underwater thunderstorm. The villagers covered their ears. Some fell to their knees. "Lies are like foam that always breaks upon the rock of truth," she said in a melodious but firm voice. "We seek more than just the guilty. We seek our sister. Where is she?" Chuka, stammering, tried to explain. We don't have her anymore. We tied her to the tree, but when we returned with the buyer, she was gone. We thought she had escaped or that the spirits had taken her back." A murmur of disbelief ran through the crowd. The villagers thought they were lying to save their skin. The red mermaid approached, ready to strike, but the yellow mermaid raised her hand. "I will read their souls," she declared. She knelt before the two men. She placed her delicate, glowing hands on their sweat-drenched foreheads. Immediately, a golden light enveloped their heads. The silence was absolute. Only the short, ragged breathing of the fisherman could be heard. The mermaid closed her eyes, her face contorted with pain as she absorbed their memories. She saw the net, the rounded belly of their sister, the forest, and finally the man in the dark cape, the cruel buyer with hollow eyes. She withdrew her hands and stood up, her expression grave. She turned to her companions.
"They speak the truth. They did not kill her, but they did something worse. They delivered her to the shadow. A man of the land, a trader of souls, has taken her to the black market of deep-sea creatures. She is a prisoner somewhere far from the water, in a cage of iron and spells." A cry of despair rose from the mermaids. The 13-year-old blue mermaid began to weep, and her tears, upon touching the ground, turned into pearls of pure blue that the villagers stared at with both greed and dread. At that precise moment, the crowd parted of its own accord. A murmur of amazement, then a respectful silence swept across the square. At the end of the path, emerging from her modest home, which now seemed to glow with an invisible aura, appeared a young woman. She was no longer the frightened, dust-covered orphan the village loved to humiliate. It was Toma, but she was transformed. She walked with the grace of a queen. She wore jewelry of indescribable beauty, necklaces of vibrant red coral, bracelets of pure gold carved by the currents, and mother-of-pearl earrings that reflected every color of the rainbow. Her skin was smooth and radiant, as if she were bathed in an eternal light. Her clothes, though local in style, were made of a fabric so fine it seemed woven from sea silk. "Look," a woman in the crowd cried, "it is the blessed girl. The river has adorned her with its finest treasures." Inkru, still held hostage by the black warrior, widened her eyes. Jealousy and fear fought on her distorted face. She could not believe that this girl, whom she had treated as a nobody, had become the most radiant being in the village. Toma stepped toward the center of the square, ignoring the astonished gazes of the villagers who once ignored her. Her eyes locked onto the mermaids, and an invisible bond seemed to tie her to these beings from elsewhere. The silence that fell over the village square was no longer the silence of terror, but of pure wonder. As Toma walked, the red dust seemed to settle beneath her feet, as if out of respect. She was no longer the mistreated servant of Inkru. She had become the living embodiment of the river's blessing. Her necklaces of coral and gold shimmered with a light that felt almost solar, and her face radiated a peace that disarmed even the coldest hearts. The villagers, their eyes wide with disbelief, whispered her name like a prayer. "Is it truly her? Is this the little Toma we let suffer?" Inkru, the stepmother, gnashed her teeth in the corner, but she could not look away. Toma's splendor burned her more than any slap ever could. At the center of the square, the little blue mermaid, the one who had been nothing more than a glowing newborn 13 years before, froze. She stared at Toma, her large azure eyes filling with tears. An invisible bond, forged in the shadows of the forest years before, snapped back into place with electric force. She didn't need words. With a cry of joy that sounded like the song of the waves, the 13-year-old mermaid girl lunged forward, forgetting her clumsy gait, and threw herself into Toma's arms. The entire village held their breath. A human and a creature of the water were embracing in front of everyone. It was an image the elders would tell stories about for centuries. "It is you!" the blue girl cried, her voice vibrating with pure emotion. "It is you who kept me warm. It is you who risked your life so I could breathe." Toma gently stroked the girl's hair, which felt like strands of marine silk. Then she placed her hand on the young mermaid's forehead, and a soft glow, a blend of gold and blue, emanated from their contact. Toma raised her head and addressed the 3 other mermaids, the red, yellow, and black warrior, as well as the entire village. "Do not be afraid," Toma began, her voice carrying a newfound authority. "The river does not seek your destruction, it seeks justice. The day I saved this child, her mother gave me a gift. It was not just these jewels or this wealth. She placed a seed of her soul in my heart." She closed her eyes for a moment, her breathing falling into rhythm with the distant pulse of the river. "Through the energy of this child I hold in my arms, I can feel what no one else can perceive. I feel the heart of your sister, the mother of this child. She is not dead. She is alive. I feel her pain. I feel the cold iron that imprisons her. She is in a city of stone, far from here, where men sell what is priceless." A massive sigh of relief swept through the crowd. The women began to weep with joy, for they understood that if the mother was found, the curse threatening the village would vanish forever. The red and yellow mermaids bowed deeply before Toma, recognizing her as a sacred guardian. "You are the bridge between our 2 worlds," the yellow mermaid declared. "If you can guide us to her, the pact between land and water will be sealed once more, and this village shall be blessed for 1,000 years." Even the fishermen, Chuka and Obina, hung their heads in shame. They realized that their greed had blinded them, while the simple compassion of an orphan girl was going to save an entire people. The village square was bathed in an unearthly light. The contrast was striking. On one side, the villagers in their simple cotton clothes. On the other, these 4 beings of supernatural colors. And in the center stood Toma, radiating a power that seemed to spring from the very heart of both the earth and the water. The black warrior finally releasing Kiru. The stepmother collapsed into the dirt, coughing and weeping, stripped of all her arrogance. She was no longer the queen of her household, but a broken woman haunted by her own cruelty. The red mermaid stepped toward the village elders, her voice echoing like distant thunder. "Your village is spared. The compassion of this child," she said, gesturing toward Toma, "has redeemed your sins. The curse of dryness is lifted. The river shall flow sweet and abundant for you once more." A massive cry of joy rose from the crowd. People embraced, some falling to their knees to thank the spirits. But the mermaid raised her hand for silence. Her gaze